Hello everybody, welcome into another lesson. So today we are going to continue factoring quadratic equations in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. Now yesterday's lesson, the c term, the constant, was positive. Today we're going to deal with it when it's negative. Now for purposes of today's lesson, the a term, the coefficient on the x squared term, will still be 1. So that's going to make our lives a lot easier. But the c term will be negative for today's lesson. So let's go ahead and get started with our first example. We have y squared plus 5y minus 6. Alright, so we got y squared plus 5y minus 6. Well, as we see, the coefficient on the y squared term is 1, so that's going to make everything today a lot easier. But our constant term, the 6 there, it's negative. It's a negative 6. It's going to work much like yesterday's lesson when it was positive, only the constant's negative. We need to find factors of negative 6. So we need to find factors of negative 6 that when added together give you the middle constant of positive 5. So let's find factors of negative 6. We could have negative 1 and positive 6. You add those together, well, negative 1 and positive 6, well, that actually gives you positive 5. So you're right there at it. We're already at it. Because if you multiply negative 1 times 6, you'll get that negative 6. But if you add the factors, you'll get that middle constant of positive 5. So all you're going to do now is take y minus 1, that quantity, times y plus 6. And if you FOIL this out, you should in fact get y squared plus 5y minus 6. So the factorization of this would be the quantity of y minus 1 times the quantity of y plus 6. And sometimes it still helps to make yourself a table for the factors of the constant term and then the sum of the factors. It helps to do that. And it can be a little bit of trial and error. That's okay. You may not always arrive at your answer right away, but you will arrive at it. And if it's not factorable, then it's prime. It would be considered a prime quadratic equation. Alright, let's do some more examples here. Alright, we got v squared minus 3v minus 4. Alright, so we got v squared minus 3v minus 4. The coefficient on the v squared term is 1, so that's going to make everything a lot easier. The next lesson we're going to deal with is when you have a coefficient on the second power term at something other than 1. That's where it can get a little bit complicated, but we'll deal with that in the next lesson. But so we need to find factors of negative 4 that when added together give you negative 3 for the middle coefficient on the v to the first term. So factors of negative 4, let's see, you could have negative 1 and 4 that are factors of negative 4. Well, if you add negative 1 and 4 together, you get positive 3. Well, the middle coefficient's supposed to be negative 3, so that doesn't work. Negative 1 and 4 don't work. But how about 1 and negative 4? If we add 1 and negative 4, you get negative 3. Well, that's exactly what we need. That gives you your middle coefficient of negative 3. So now you're going to take v plus 1, that quantity, times v minus 4. So the factorization you should get for this would be the quantity of v plus 1 times the quantity of v minus 4. Alright, what's next? X squared minus 6x minus 16. So we got x squared minus 6x minus 16. So the coefficient on the x squared term is 1, so that's going to make everything easy. Now we need to find factors of negative 16 that when added together give you the middle coefficient on the x to the first term of negative 6. So let's find factors of negative 16. Of course we have negative 1 and positive 16. Those are factors of negative 16. When added together, that'll give you positive 15. Well, the middle coefficient is supposed to be negative 6, not positive 15, so we can scratch that out. How about positive 1 and negative 16? Well, you add positive 1 and negative 16, you'll get negative 15. Well, the middle coefficient is supposed to be negative 6, not negative 15. That doesn't work. So how about negative 2 and positive 8? Well, if we add negative 2 and positive 8, you'll get positive 6. Well, the middle coefficient is supposed to be negative 6, not positive 6, so that doesn't work. How about positive 2 and negative 8? If you take 2 and negative 8, add them together, you'll get negative 6. Well, we struck gold because the middle coefficient is supposed to be negative 6, and that's exactly what we get here if you have positive 2 and negative 8 as your factors. So now you'll take x plus positive 2 times the quantity of x minus 8, and that would be your factorization. You'll get the quantity of x plus 2 times the quantity of x minus 8. Good, making sure everybody could see everything. Alright, what's next here? X squared plus 2x minus 8. So we got x squared plus 2x minus 8. Alright, so the coefficient on the x squared term is 1. That'll make your life easy. Now we need to find factors of negative 8 that when added together will give you a constant, will give you a coefficient of 2, a positive 2 on the x to the first term. So let's find some factors of negative 8. Well, we could start with negative 1 and positive 8. Added together, negative 1 and positive 8, that'll give you 7. Well, the coefficient's supposed to be positive 2 on the x term, not 7, so that doesn't work. Now how about positive 1 and negative 8? Well, add 1 and negative 8 together, you get negative 7. Well, the coefficient on the x to the first term, the middle term, should be positive 2, not negative 7. That's not going to work. So how about negative 2 and positive 4? Add negative 2 and positive 4, you'll get positive 2. And we struck gold because negative 2 and positive 4, when added together, give you that middle coefficient of positive 2. So now you're going to have x minus 2, that quantity, times x plus 4. And that would be your factorization. And if you FOIL it out, you would get x squared plus 2x minus 8. So you end up getting x minus 2 times the quantity of x plus 4. Yes, always set yourself up with the table of values here like we have on the right hand side. That's going to be a lifesaver for you. Alright. We have c squared minus 4c minus 12. So we got c squared minus 4c minus 12. The coefficient on the c squared term is 1, so that's important. That's going to help you out. So now you need to find factors of negative 12 that'll give you the coefficient of negative 4 on your c to the first term. So let's start out finding factors of negative 12. Well, we have negative 1 and positive 12. Add those together, you should get a positive 11. Well, that's definitely not going to work because the coefficient on the c of the first term should be negative 4, not positive 11. So next, let's do positive 1 and negative 12. Well, 1 and negative 12 add together give you negative 11. That still doesn't work because the coefficient should be negative 4 for the middle term, not negative 11. So next, let's go to negative 2 and positive 6. Add negative 2 and positive 6 together, you get positive 4. Still doesn't work because the coefficient on the c to the first term, the middle term, should be negative 4, not positive 4. So that doesn't work. So how about positive 2 and negative 6? Well, do 2 and negative 6, add those together, you get negative 4. We struck gold there because the middle term's supposed to have a coefficient of negative 4, and we get that with factors of 2 and negative 6. So now you'll have c plus 2, take that quantity, multiply it times c minus 6. And that would be your factorization of this, would be the quantity of c plus 2 times the quantity of c minus 6. Alright. What have we got here next? U squared minus 10u minus 9. We got u squared minus 10u minus 9. Well, the coefficient on the u squared term is 1, so that's going to make your life easy. Now you just simply need to go ahead, find factors of negative 9. That'll give you the middle coefficient of negative 10. So let's go ahead, find factors of negative 9. Well, start with negative 1 and positive 9. You add negative 1 and positive 9 together, you'll get positive 8. That doesn't work because this gives you a coefficient of 8 when it should be negative 10 for your middle term. So how about positive 1 and negative 9? Positive 1 and negative 9, that'll give you negative 8 when you add them together. Still doesn't work because your middle coefficient should be negative 10, not negative 8. So how about negative 3 and positive 3? Well, negative 3 and positive 3 give you 0. And your middle coefficient should be negative 10, not 0. Doesn't work. So how about 3 and negative 3? Just add those together, you still get 0. Not going to work. So in other words, we have a prime polynomial. This is prime. This cannot be factored any further. So the answer is this is not factorable. This is a prime polynomial. And you will have that sometimes. It's important to understand you are going to have that sometimes. You're not doing it wrong. You're not going crazy. Not every trinomial we have is going to be factorable. All right. We have t squared minus 16t minus 40. So we got t squared minus 16t minus 40. Well, the coefficient on the t squared term is 1, so that makes life easy. Now we just need to go ahead and find factors of negative 40 that will give you the middle coefficient on the t to the first term of negative 16. So let's go ahead, let's find some factors of negative 40. Well, we have, of course, negative 1 and positive 40. When you add those factors together, you get positive 39. Well, that doesn't work because your middle coefficient should be negative 16, not positive 39. So how about if we did positive 1 and negative 40? Well, positive 1 and negative 40, add those together, you get negative 39. Still doesn't work. Your coefficient on the middle term should be negative 16, not negative 39. So how about negative 2 and positive 20? Add those together, you'll get positive 18. That doesn't work because your coefficient for the middle term should be negative 16, not positive 18. So how about positive 2 and negative 20 for factors? Positive 2 and negative 20 add together give you negative 18. Still doesn't work. Your coefficient on the middle term should be negative 16, not negative 18. So how about negative 4 and positive 10? Add negative 4 and positive 10 together, you'll get positive 6. That doesn't work because your coefficient for the middle term should be negative 16, not positive 6. So how about positive 4 and negative 10? Well, 4 and negative 10 add together give you negative 6. Your coefficient should be negative 16, not negative 6, so that doesn't work. So how about negative 5 and positive 8? Negative 5 and positive 8 add together give you positive 3. Your coefficient for the middle term should be negative 16, not positive 3. One last factor is positive 5 and negative 8. When you add 5 and negative 8 together, you get negative 3. Still doesn't work. You should have a middle coefficient of negative 16, not negative 3. So this here is another prime polynomial. It can't factor any further. It's prime. It doesn't factor any further because there's no factors that will factor into this. So, and again, there will be times you'll have that. It's good to see such examples so you know you're not going crazy. You're not doing it wrong if you don't have a factor. All right. Let's get a little bit harder here. We have a squared minus ab minus 42b squared. So we got a squared minus ab minus 42b squared. Well, the coefficient on the a squared term is positive 1, still going to make your life easier. Now, we need to find factors of that negative 42 on your c coefficient. That factors of negative 42 that will give you a middle coefficient on your ab term of negative 1. So, we'll find factors of negative 42. We'll start with negative 1 and positive 42. If you add the sum of those together, you would get positive 41. Well, your middle coefficient should be negative 1, not positive 41. That doesn't work. So how about 1 and negative 42? Well, if you add 1 and negative 42 together, you get negative 41. Your coefficient should be negative 1, not negative 41. Alright, let's go next to negative 2 and positive 21. You add negative 2 and positive 21 together, you get positive 19. Well, your coefficient should be negative 1, not positive 19. That doesn't work. So how about positive 2 and negative 21? Well, add those two together, you get negative 19. Your coefficient should be negative 1, not negative 19. So how about negative 3 and positive 14? Add those together, you get positive 11. Your coefficient should be negative 1, not positive 11. So then how about positive 3 and negative 14? Well, that would give you, add those together, you get negative 11. Your coefficient should be negative 1, not negative 11. That doesn't work. Last but not least, we have negative 6 and positive 7. Add negative 6 and positive 7 together, you would get positive 1. Your coefficient should be negative 1, not positive 1, so negative 6 and 7 don't work. How about positive 6 and negative 7? If you add those factors together, you would get negative 1. And that's exactly what we need, the coefficient of negative 1. So, what you're going to do is you'll still have a plus 6 times your square root of the b squared, so that'd be 6b. Since you have two variables, you would have to take the square root of b squared, and the b would just tag along with your second term on each of the quantities. You would get a plus 6b times the quantity of a minus 7b. And if you FOIL this out, you should get a squared minus ab minus 42b squared. So the factorization of this is going to be the quantity of a plus 6b times the quantity of a minus 7b. Alright, let's see what's next. R squared minus 20RS minus 44S squared. Alright, so we got r squared minus 20RS minus 44S squared. Well, the coefficient on the r squared term is 1, so that's going to make life easy. Now we need to figure out what factors of negative 44 will give you the middle coefficient of negative 20. So let's figure out some factors of negative 44. Let's start with negative 1 and positive 44. Add negative 1 and positive 44 together, you'll get 43. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 20, so positive 43 isn't going to work. Next, we'll do factors of 1 and negative 44. Well, 1 and negative 44, That would, you add those together, you get negative 43. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 20, not negative 43. That doesn't work. So next, how about negative 2 and positive 22? Add negative 2 and positive 22 together, you get positive 20. Well, you need your coefficient to be negative 20 in the middle, not positive 20. That doesn't work. So how about positive 2 and negative 22? Add 2 and negative 22 together, you would get negative 20. And that's exactly what you need, because your middle coefficient is negative 20, so we found it. So you're going to take the quantity of r plus 2, and actually 2s, because you have an s squared term for your third term. So you would have the square root of s squared tagging along. You get r plus 2s times the quantity of r minus 22s. And if you FOILed this back out, you would get r squared minus 20rs minus 44s squared. So the factorization of this polynomial is r plus 2s, that quantity, times r minus 22s. See what's next here. We got u squared plus 9uv minus 70v squared. Alright, so we got u squared plus 9uv minus 70v squared. We need to figure out factors. Well, since the constant on the u squared term is 1, that's going to make life easy. Now we need to figure out factors of negative 70 that, when added together, will give you the middle coefficient of positive 9. So let's go ahead and get started. Factors of negative 70. We start with negative 1 and positive 70. You add negative 1 and positive 70 together, you'll get positive 69. Well, your middle coefficient should be 9, not 69. That doesn't work. So how about positive 1 and negative 70? Add 1 and negative 70 together, you'll get negative 69. Well, your middle coefficient should be positive 9, not negative 69, so that doesn't work. How about negative 2 and positive 35? Add negative 2 and positive 35 together, you get positive 33. Well, your middle coefficient should be 9, not 33. Not going to work. So how about positive 2 and negative 35? Add those together, you'll get negative 33. Well, your middle coefficient should be positive 9, not negative 33. So that doesn't work. Alright, how about negative 5 and positive 14? Those are factors. Well, you add negative 5 and positive 14, you get positive 9. We struck gold, because your middle coefficient should be 9, and that's exactly what you get here with negative 5 and 14 as your factors. So now you'll take the quantity of u minus 5, and since we have a square variable on the third term, it'd be minus 5v. So you'd have u minus 5v times the quantity of u plus 14v. And that would be your factorization you should get for this polynomial. Would be the quantity of u minus 5v times the quantity of u plus 14v. do a few more examples here. Alright, x squared minus 2xy minus 63y squared. Alright, so we got x squared minus 2xy minus 63y squared. Coefficient on the x squared term is positive 1, so we don't have to worry about that. We just got to figure out factors now of negative 63 that when added together give you the middle coefficient of negative 2. So let's go ahead and do that. Negative 63. Well, we'll start with negative 1 and positive 63. Add those together, you would get positive 62. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 2, not positive 62. That doesn't work. So how about positive 1 and negative 63? Well, 1 minus 63, that's negative 62. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 2, not negative 62. That doesn't work. So how about negative 3 and 21? Negative 3 and 21 added together give you positive 18. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 2, not 18. That doesn't work. How about positive 3 and negative 21? 3 minus 21, that's negative 18. You need your middle coefficient to be negative 2, not negative 18. Last but not least, how about negative 7 and positive 9? Well, you add negative 7 and 9 together, you get positive 2. You need your middle coefficient to be negative 2, not positive 2. That doesn't work. So last but not least, let's do 7 and negative 9. Add 7 and negative 9 together, you'll get negative 2. And that's exactly what we need because your middle coefficient is supposed to be negative 2. So we've arrived at it. So you'll have the quantity of x plus 7y, since the third term's a y squared. You'll have x plus 7y times the quantity of x minus 9y. And that would be your factorization of this polynomial, would be x plus 7y, that quantity, times x minus 9y. So as you see, a lot of this can be trial and error. I'd like to do 2 more examples here. I think 2 more examples would be sufficient for today. Alright, we got h squared minus 25 hk minus 54 k squared. Alright, so we got h squared minus 25 hk minus 54 k squared. Well, your coefficient on the h squared term is positive 1, so that's going to make your life easy. Now we need to figure out factors of negative 54 that when added together will give you the middle coefficient of negative 25. So let's go ahead and get started. We have negative 54. So we start with negative 1 and positive 54. Add those two together, you would get positive 53. Your middle coefficient should be negative 25, not positive 53. That doesn't work. So how about 1 and negative 54? Well, 1 minus 54, that's negative 53. Your middle coefficient should be negative 25, not negative 53. Alright, so how about negative 2 and positive 27? Well, negative 2 and positive 27 added together give you positive 25. Your middle coefficient should be negative 25, not positive 25. So let's move on to positive 2 and negative 27. 2 minus 27, that's negative 25. And we struck gold because the middle coefficient should be negative 25. And we've arrived. So now you'll take your h plus the 2k, that quantity, times your h minus your 27k. And that would be your factorization for this polynomial, would be the quantity of h plus 2k times the quantity of h minus 27k. Alright, one more example and I think we're done for the day. We'll do this one. P squared minus 16pq minus 36q squared. Alright, so we got p squared minus 16pq minus 36q squared. Well, the coefficient on the p squared term is 1, so that makes your life easier. Now we need to figure out factors of negative 36 that'll give you the middle coefficient of negative 16. So let's figure out factors of negative 36. So how about negative 1 and positive 36? Add those together, you would get positive 35. You need your middle coefficient to be negative 16, not positive 35. So next we'll do 1 and negative 36. Add 1 and negative 36 together, you get negative 35. Well, you need your middle coefficient to be negative 16, not negative 35. That doesn't work. Next we deal with negative 2 and positive 18. When you add negative 2 and positive 18 together, you get positive 16. Well, your middle coefficient should be negative 16, not positive 16. That doesn't work. So then we can do 2 and negative 18. When you add 2 and negative 18 together, you get negative 16. And that's exactly what we need, because the middle coefficient should be negative 16. So now we can do the quantity of p plus 2 times q plus 2q, that quantity times p minus 18q. And that would be your factorization of this polynomial, would be p plus 2q times the quantity of p minus 18q. So basically it's just a matter of doing what we've been doing. That's really all there is to it. And when your coefficient on the first term is 1, that's going to make your life easy. You just got to figure out factors of the third term. The factors of that coefficient on the third term, that give you, when added together, give you your middle coefficient. So that's it for this lesson. Next lesson we will dive into when the a term, your first coefficient, is something other than 1. It's not bad, but it is more complicated than what we've done so far. But it's definitely doable. But I hope everybody has a good day. Take care.